Okay, again, thank you for joining us today. I'm Dan Sweet, Director of Communications and Public Relations for HAI. We're glad you joined us. We know that you have a very busy schedule, and we appreciate the fact that you take time out of that schedule to join us for these webinars. Today's topic is an industry outlook with HeliOffshore. They are the leading safety advocates in the HeliOffshore industry and have a great outlook on how the industry is doing. Our speakers today, we have Jim Viola, who's the president and CEO of HAI. And we have Francois Lassale, who is the chief operating officer of HeliOffshore. And you'll learn more about him in just a moment. This is an interactive webinar. We do encourage you to participate. We do encourage you to ask questions. Please use the question module in the bottom part of your screen or on the side of your screen. The chat screen is a little bit more difficult to work with. And so the question module is the easiest way to start. Submit the questions and we will try to answer as many of them as possible towards the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive a copy of the webinar probably tomorrow, possibly as late as Monday. Once it has had time to render, we will make the link available as well on our website. That way, if you'd like to share it with anybody, or if you want to go back and review something you might have missed, you're welcome to do so. With that, I'd like to introduce Jim Viola, President and CEO of HAI.
Thanks, Dan. So we'll get things rolling. One of the key elements in the presentation with HeliOffshore today is collaboration. In this case, the folks at HeliOffshore are working with their members to find safe solutions to issues within the offshore petroleum industry. Collaboration is and will continue to be a crucial part of safety in our industry. Hopefully, many of you watching this presentation are already aware of the growth of the International Helicopter Safety Team into the new Vertical Aviation Safety Team, or VAST. While the evolution has been developing for over the last 12 months, it was formally announced this week, and I saw it got picked up some press around the globe, so hopefully you've seen that. HAI, as your association, is pleased and proud to be part of this international organization that focuses on solving the safety issues that affect our global industry. In VAST, and as with HeliOffshore, business competitors are putting aside their differences to work together to make our industry safer. The leading causes of rotorcraft accidents are essentially the same worldwide, regardless of the language or the time zone. So cooperatively working together will result in similar messaging and similar education programs, especially when we find programs that are finding success and we share that information. If you'd like to learn more about VAST, we'll have Dan give the web address at the end of the webinar today. There are countless situations where business competitors work together for the sake of industry and for the public good. So please join everyone in our industry as we continue to pursue the goal of zero fatal accidents. So now let me tell you about our guest speaker, Francois. Francois has a long list of accomplishments. He's currently the Chief Operating Officer for HeliOffshore, working with the global offshore helicopter transport industry. And before that, he was a managing director for a firm here in the United States of America, bringing turnkey solutions to the industry. He also has a military background in both the South African Army and the Royal Air Force, doing both fixed wing and rotary wing. Since leaving the military, he also flew airline, freight, and VIP missions, and also head of state operations. He has been an instructor, and he has served at the Flight Safety Foundation's Business Aviation Board for 13 years. He also is the Vice Chairman for the European Helicopter Association, the Vice Chairman of the International Pilot Training Association, the Vice Chairman of the International Association of Aeronautical Flight Auditors, and is ISBAO auditor. He is a fellow with the Royal Aeronautical Society and is an upper freeman with the Honorable Company of Air Pilots. So now I'd like to have Francois bring up his camera and let's get started with today's webinar. Welcome.
Hey, Jim.
So let's just roll right into this and start with some high-level stuff. What is HeliOffshore's vision, and how do you intend to help deliver on it?
Okay, well first of all, thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity for me to speak to a lot of your members and the audience. Is a great opportunity. So thank you for this. And it's a good opportunity to go through some of the things we're doing. So that's a good question, right? Our vision and how do we deliver on it? And you've got to consider that in the context of the challenging times that we find ourselves in. But really what it boils down to is people and purpose. People are our purpose. It's about bringing everybody home safely every day. I mean, we can make it as complicated as we want to, but that nuts and bolts, that's it. Bring everybody home safely every day. People are our purpose. Why? Because it's people who deliver safety on the front line every day through their daily work. I mean, that's just a simple fact. And talk line as this big thing, front line is the front line. We talk, all of our initiatives are trying to drive multiple front lines, and those front lines are made up of passengers and pilots and mechanics and safety leaders and designers and investors and all those different stakeholder groups. They're all multiple front lines, all having slightly different conversations. And really what we're trying to achieve is the collaboration and the collaborative work at HeliOffshore is trying to equip that front line with the right tools, training techniques, and technology to do their jobs as safely as possible. And that's why we place an emphasis on human performance, because really humans are at the heart of the industry and basically the heart of our success. So that's the people element of our vision, right? So how do we deliver on that? The second part of your question. And it's through collaboration, but it's data led. So I've got some slides to show you. I'll show you some slides. And through the course of today, I've got some videos that we can probably go back to and have a look at videos. It breaks up me talking all the time and boring everybody, but it kind of explains some of the stuff quite nicely. Oh. And these. We're doing our best with virtual conferences and webinars. We've just had our virtual conference, and it's very 2D, right? I'm talking to a screen and you on the other side of the screen, and I can't see all the attendees. So I'm going to make it a little bit 3D today. I've got a couple of questions, just some polling questions that I can ask everybody, and I'll push it to your mobile device, and I'll give you a URL that everybody can type it in, and hopefully you guys on the other end of the camera are willing to play along and can answer a question, because it'll be useful to find out where you're at. But let's go. Let me share my screen and go straight to the first slide, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
So here we go. Can you see that? Can you see that, Jim?
Got it.
Okay. So for everybody, if you could prepare yourselves and just go down to the web address at the bottom right of the screen, www.polev.com/HeliOffshore. Put that in your mobile device, your iPad, your laptop, whatever you've got, type that in. It'll ask you for your name, just punch your name in there. And when I push the question to you, you can then start filling it in. And the first question that I was going to actually ask is where are you calling in from today? It'll be kind of cool to see where everybody's calling in from today. Let's have a look. I'll push the question out and activate that. And let's see where everybody's calling in today. So if you've got that web address up there, and you can zoom in, by the way, if you're on the phone, you can zoom into the map and just with your finger, you can kind of touch on the screen and tell us where you're calling in from today. We can see that the majority of folks are coming in. I'm guessing, Europe and Middle East and Asia, it's kind of too late in the evening, so I'm not expecting too much from that side of the world. Yeah, what we're doing here is just kind of getting you used to you.
I don't think we told them where you are. Why don't you tell them where you are today?
Okay, I'm in Northern Ireland, which if I put up my phone, I could type it in as well. How about this? I could do this too. And poll everywhere. There we go. Right. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to touch where I am on the screen, which is right about there. So I'm the furthest east today. But that's cool. So it's really just getting everybody used to using the device. So well, I'll ask you only one more question, so don't worry about it. But it gives us an opportunity to kind of have a little bit of fun and make it three-dimensional.
Absolutely.
Right. Let's go back to this. Let's go back to your question. How do we intend on delivering on our vision? And it has to be data driven. It's got to be less anecdotal and more data driven. So we've strived since day one of HeliOffshore. We're only 6 years old. I started the development of the data program back in 2016, early 16, and we partnered with some good companies. So GE Digital, Tonic Analytics is a UK-based company, and we brought on board Dr. Matt Greaves from Cranfield University. He came on board to help develop the program, and we've been going great guns through the process. And the idea is to try and get data to help drive strategy, data to help drive where we need to point our resources, data to help drive what the industry rate is. What is the true accident rate of the industry? Because it's one thing to say, oh, the accidents are going down, but actually, if we're not measuring the hours and the rate that the accidents are going down, then it's a bit of a falsity. It's a false economy. So we need to understand what the rate is. So we're covering offshore. So we're covering oil and gas, what they now class themselves as energy companies, all the renewables. So we're doing wind farm, all offshore wind farm, and all offshore search and rescue. We're not doing military search and rescue. It's just the search and rescue, commercial search and rescue that supports the offshore network globally. So as a global organization, we've got fairly broad coverage, and within our 50 helicopter operator members, we have about 75% of the global fleet of aircraft. So we've got a substantial amount of aircraft. And we're in a position now where we're able to collect flight data monitoring. We've got some agreements in place. That's helping to support the work that we're doing in our flight path management. It's helping with the eye tracking research we're doing. It's helping with the FCOM. It's helping with the helicopter terrain awareness update we're doing, because it helps to inform that. And of course, the recommended practices, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And then we've got the statistics. That's the rate data I was telling you about. And then obviously we do a lot of surveys and we get a lot of data. So that helps to inform anecdotally, where the industry's at. But let's focus on this chart, because I think it's an important thing to have a look at. CFIT, or CFITs I call it, controlled flight into surface, 33%, loss of control, 18%. Let me just do an annotation here. You guys can see what I'm talking about. Let's annotate. So controlled flight into surface, 33%, loss of control. So really, these two contain 51% of our fatal accidents are through loss of control and controlled flight into surface. Another 20% exists in system reliability. So you can see the power plant and non-power plant. Whoops, where's my mouse? There it is there. Those two elements there. And they constitute another 20%, 21%.
Now, with
so we know, sorry,
technology that's been coming on, I see fuel is still an issue. That's kind of one that kind of jumps out a little bit.
Which one is that, Jim? I missed what you said there.
Fuel. I mean, it's, with the technology and the better, ways of burn rates and everything that's now done for us, your part of the industry still has an issue with fuel. I guess you have, any thoughts on that? Any reason? Is that an area?
Yeah, to be honest with you, the taxonomies we're looking at in terms of non-power plant and power plant is there aren't too many around fuel. I mean, we're looking at the power plant section, which is the 6% bracket there.
Right.
The fuel is another 6%, but that really doesn't form the majority. So we've lumped the two power plant and non-power plant items together to create that 21% under system reliability. And that is formed up of quite a few other little subcategories or taxonomies, which really amounts to a part on an aircraft breaking, whether it's a gearbox or an actuator, and it's the human machine system. So I'll talk about our human hazards analysis for the maintainers, because that's where we're finding within those two categories is where we're placing a lot of emphasis. And the element of human hazards analysis is really designed to understand why an aircraft or an engine was designed that way and how the mechanics are fixing it. And we kind of bringing those two bodies together to create this human hazards analysis. And we now are about to complete the standardized approach through the OEMs on the development of this standard for human hazards analysis, which is really trying to give the mechanics the tools to do the job. And we're talking about error tolerant design here. So it's effectively on a particular aircraft, you can install an actuator upside down and not visibly know that you've done that. And so, you know, through simple error tolerant design, that can be eradicated because we know that the human is more than likely going to make the mistake on any given day. So it's a combination of those technical failures and the human machine system forms that 21%. So we lump those two elements together, and we you know, that forms in part of our safety performance model and our strategy. So I think it's important to kind of understand where we're at with that one, because otherwise it's very difficult for us to look at everything in isolation and go, oh yeah, well that's definitely the issue based on anecdotal evidence. So while I talk about that, it's also important to understand that part of delivering on this requires data. I've just talked about the data. That helps drive the resource. It helps to, the resource, I mean money and people for all of the things that we're doing. So it means we can be very targeted. The data means that we can start to measure the things that we're doing, are they working or not? Because that happens quite a lot. You know, you'll get a group of very, very clever people come together and figure out a solution. They'll do the solution, whether it's a recommended practice or a video or training or SOPs or a document or something like that, or a cool innovation, and they'll do it and they'll launch it, and then they'll move on to the next project. What we want to go back and do is measure that thing is having an effect on the front line, or is there any point in doing it in the first place? We need to be able to measure that. So that's the other element of driving. So people, our purpose, the collaborative piece, and obviously data. So collaboration is really important. You opened the session today talking about collaboration. You talked about VAST and how that intends to stimulate collaboration across the industry's bodies globally. But what it does talk to, it means that we can pool our resources, and COVID is really, in a sort of rather macabre way, facilitated that, because there's a lot of people who've looked at their current situation and gone, you know what, we can't do this on our own. We really need to partner up with some other groups that are like-minded and thinking the same way. Let's have a conversation about who's doing what, so we don't duplicate effort. Let's see how we can support each other and how we can amplify each other's voices. That really is where we wanted to go with the collaborative piece. And what I'm going to do is run a video. So Dan, if you can get the video ready, I've got a little video to talk about the collaborative effort in HeliOffshore, and it probably explains it better than I can. Dan, are you okay to share that?
Here we go.
Thank you.
HeliOffshore believes in safety through collaboration, in working together despite fierce competition and brutal industry conditions, so that no lives are lost in offshore aviation. Behind our powerful collaboration are numerous safety conversations. Conversations between leaders, investors and frontline pilots, between maintainers, designers and passengers. Conversations always start small, sometimes just a handful of words, perhaps sharing an idea or an opinion, sharing a problem or a recommendation. But valuable conversations never stay small. Safety conversations grow and grow until we're sharing data, sharing strategies, and sharing our talents to improve our collective safety performance. These are important conversations, sometimes difficult ones. We need diplomacy, respect, independence, and focus. We need patience. We need the courage to challenge and lead, and we need imagination and creativity to invent the tools, training, and technology that will deliver a safer front line. It's hard work, especially in a year like this. But when we stick with it, we turn conversation into collaboration, into data, decision, and delivery. we enjoy an aligned industry and a safer frontline where no lives are lost in offshore aviation. So we want to hear what you think. Let's start with your opinion, your safety recommendation, and your plans for the chapter ahead.
Thanks, Dan.
That was great.
So I just wanted to end the collaborative piece on that one, you know, and how it sort of pieces together. But hopefully that's made some sense, Jim.
No, absolutely. And that's certainly a good way to pull it all together. You know, that safety conversation and the collaboration, you know, the work that HeliOffshore is doing, the vision they've had, and as much as they've got done over the years, it is important to have that data. You've been able to start doing that and use the data for data-driven answers, which is awesome. So, so you did mention the conference you just had virtually. Are there any new concerns or stuff that you heard during the virtual conference from operators? And did you come up with any conclusions into reconciling some of those concerns? And I know it just happened last week, so I guess stick to anything new.
Well, ironically, I mean, obviously, because it's a virtual conference, like I said, it's 2D. It's so much more difficult to engage with everybody. You know, we are really looking forward to the day where we can actually do that face to face, pretty much like Heli Expo. We want it back face to face, right? Because we know that's a much more powerful way of us collaborating, getting together, talking about these things. But so what really informed the conference is the surveys we've done before them, and I think it was important to understand that. We had these regular, it started off as weekly COVID calls with all the stakeholders in the industry. So we got all the stakeholders together, and we would have on a Wednesday, we'd have all the stakeholders together, and then on a Thursday, we would have the helicopter operators would come and get together, and they would discuss their challenges. And we were able to feed that back into the other stakeholder groups, you know, who was responsible for what. And out of that came a lot of concerns, the double whammy, right? The low oil prices was happening at the same time as the pandemic. And so it was a double whammy across the industry. And that was of a major concern, and still is. It hasn't gone away because the oil prices haven't gone. They've gone up, they've stabilized a bit back at $60 a barrel, around about that area, which is better for the industry. But the pandemic hasn't gone away. And so people were really trying to support a critical industry which had to continue flying. We couldn't stop flying overnight. The flying needed to continue. And so we had to be real clever, real quick on how we manage that, right? So, and when we looked at it, we sat there thinking, crikey, there are a lot of conversations going on around how best to deal with it. And so we got those folks together, and we got them to start sharing. And we just created the medium, the conduit, the portal for that conversation, and for them to share their documents, their risk analysis, their you know, the OEMs shared all their the design criteria on separating the cabin from the cockpit so none of the virus would spread, for example. We had a lot of organizations sharing their risk matrices on how to deal with this, or passenger evacuation off a platform should somebody become ill. How do you separate passenger or patient from other passengers? It was a whole lot of really, really unanswered questions. Who does the testing? Who's responsible for the testing? Does it happen at the airport? Does it happen in the lounge? You know, there were a huge amount of unanswered questions. And you know, we were sat in the middle of all this going on. We just went, just bring it all together. Get those conversations lined up. And it really was a step change for us. But what it did was it meant we had an aligned conversation about where our concerns were. So we ran a couple of surveys, and we were asking similar questions to the energy companies and to the helicopter operators, and that bore out some concerns, right? So that bore out concerns which you saw coming out in the conference, and one of those was mental health and well-being. So how are people managing with mental health and well-being? So many people are worried about their jobs and their longevity of their job. Am I actually going to have a job next week? And how do I manage safely? You know, how do I fly safely? How do I sleep all right? Anecdotal stories of two pilots who were just about to get airborne. And while they were there briefing before the flight, they found out that their wives were being made redundant from their jobs, right? And so that's got to have an impact on the organization. And so then how does the organization manage that? So what we did was we started a piece of work called Focused Work, and it was really, we're just finishing the paper now. And that was really to try and address one of the major concerns around the industry's mental health and well-being, which has been driven by that double whammy, low oil prices and COVID. So I think that's one area that was a concern that came out. And we're trying to address it through a practical tool to the front line to sort of raise awareness on it's okay to talk about this stuff. And if you've got a tool with a checklist on, then you can kind of question yourself to look at observable behaviors in others in your team and how you can support them. And then how does the organization support that narrative with their own internal protocols. So yeah, we've made good progress in that area.
Yeah, no, that was one of the areas, you know, as I participated last week, that was, you know, definitely played into the safety aspect, and was glad you guys took that on and are continuing to work that. So let me shift a little bit. So how does HeliOffshore's tagline, the safety through collaboration, and I know we've said collaboration a couple times now, but reflect the ongoing relationship between HeliOffshore and HAI? How do you see that?
Yeah, so the safety through collaboration it's easy to say that, but collaboration is a lot harder than you think it is. I've been doing it only for 6 years. And we really, really want to work hard to demonstrate that we're being as collaborative as possible. We don't claim to have all the answers, but we know as an industry, we're going to get to the answers a lot quicker if we get together, without a shadow of a doubt. And if we share talent, brains, expertise, resources, we're going to arrive at that point a lot quicker. And we know that's good for all of us. It doesn't, I really don't care what stakeholder group you're in. It doesn't matter, because a safer front line serves us as an industry. It helps our reputation as a helicopter industry globally. And like I said, it doesn't matter whether you're in HEMS, whether you're in offshore, whether you're in onshore, whether you're in aerial work, it doesn't matter. The helicopter reputation in some areas isn't fantastic. And by getting the industry to a place where it's as safe to travel on a helicopter as it is an airline, that's going to do us the world of good. So, you know, that for us, that's important. But that goes back to mission statement. So I'll share a slide again so we can kind of have a look at it. Let me just move through this, which is the mission statement, right? And a safer frontline served by open, responsive, aligned industry. You know, right? And our purpose and no lies are lost in offshore aviation. That speaks to itself.
Yeah.
And when you look at it from that perspective, what does open mean? Well, the sharing of data. So we have our network of operators are sharing their FDM data with us. They're sharing their rate data, you know, and likewise, we're sharing it. So all the materials that we do in terms of our recommended practices or any of our resources or papers and stuff like that is available on our website. So that's open. We don't hold this stuff close to our chest because it's for safety. And despite the discomfort, the operators, the OEMs, and the energy companies have continued to share. And it pushed them, COVID pushed them out of their comfort zone. But because they saw the results of that sort of open sharing, where we weren't going to compete on safety, it was those things that directly impact safety. We weren't going to compete on those, and we were going to openly share that stuff. Really created a step change in attitudes. Like I said, I've been doing this for nearly 6 years now. When I came into this industry, it was very adversarial, right? You had the OEMs in their corners, you had the energy companies in their corner, you had the operators in their corner, and there was this, and HeliOffshore was stuck in the middle, you know, getting kicked by everybody. But effectively, we were able to start opening up those conversations and bringing those people together in the room and facilitating an aligned message. I go back to the first answer to the first question. How did we do that?
Yes.
We did that by creating a strategy that was driven by data. So that takes care of any arguments because it's not anecdotal. It's now data driven. Right.
Well, just on that point there, I mean, the data, as you're talking about, you know, and your industry is a lot more well-defined. And I'm, you know, talking with Tim as well, even though it's well-defined HeliOffshore, there's still some other players out there that could be involved. And it's all about, you know, the open to me is transparency. So we're all there, you know, aligned industry, a globally aligned industry that's responsive to society is what, I mean, that's a dream. And I really applaud
Yeah.
Heli Offshore for being able to do it in your sector. And we want to take those lessons learned and be collaborative with you.
Yeah, and for us, it's you know, sometimes you get a little bit of feedback going, oh, HeliOffshore is kind of elitist. It only deals with the big players who've got lots of money. The truth is, it's not like that. That's the reality of it. It's not like that at all. Yes, it is quite a powerful industry, or a powerful sector of the industry, supported by some big oil companies. But it took that brave step from the 5 founding members of HeliOffshore originally. So Bristow, PHI, ERA back then, Bond, now Babcock, and CHC. Those are the 5 founding members that went, you know what? We've got to stop competing on safety, and we've got to dig our hands in our pockets, and we've got to kick off this impartial body that can help bring this together for us, because we recognize that we can't all do this on our own. So that was really the visionary step that those leaders took, and that was true safety leadership, that they were willing to share stuff that they felt that they could, compete with. Right? We're safer than them, so we'll get the contract, right? So we were able to break down those barriers. It took a couple of years, but we were able to get there. We started with 5 members. We now have over 100 members worldwide. So we've got a reasonable chunk of those players.
Well, very good.
So I'll come back to the responsive part. Yeah, sorry, Jim.
Yeah, just a little bit of delay, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are the lessons learned in the collaboration that HAI wants to do with you, both in your Heli Offshore hat and European Helicopter Association. I mean, all of those things, the better that we can try to help as an association to make sure that we're not competing for safety or against safety. So please, let's keep up this great communication we have.
Oh, absolutely, and I think it's important that we keep that going, because the last thing we can afford to do as an industry is everybody off going doing their own thing, and there's a huge duplication of effort, right? Let's pool our resources where it makes sense. Obviously, in some areas it's not going to make sense, right? Because it's very specific or niche to that sector of the market, and that sector of the market is going to have to deal with some of the stuff that they do. HEMS is a good example of that, right? And offshore is a good example of that. But we now have the wind farm industry, so we're part of that. We've created the new wind farm recommended practices. So it's a smaller aircraft, but operating in a similar environment. So there's a lot of crossover, but there's some very specific stuff to that sector of the industry. And we're hoping that by sharing this information, by making it available, other sectors of the helicopter industry can pick it up and look at it and go, you know what, we can use some of this. Some may be pertinent, some may not be. So it's important to do that. And I think the other element in the vision here, under responsive, what does that mean? Responsive means we need to be proactive. I'm a very action-oriented person, and so I've been very driven to get HeliOffshore to be as proactive as possible in a lot of the work that we've done over the last 6 years. Gretchen, before Tim, was exactly the same. And Tim's come on board now. He's singularly focused on being proactive. And so therefore, when we talk about being proactive, we talk about sometimes being able to challenge the status quo. It's really important that we continue to ask those questions. And then, of course, the third element to the vision is the aligned part. And it's about being able to get in a room with all your stakeholders and have those gritty conversations. And the courage of your convictions to be able to have those conversations. And believe me, it's not that easy. It's real tough when you feel you're going to be judged, or we've got people who are sitting in the room with their customers, having some of these gritty conversations. And that's challenging. It's really challenging. So, that's how we've got there. And like I said, these aren't principles we hold to our chest. It's not a secret. We don't make it a secret. The only thing we make secret is our data. That's obviously highly, highly, highly protected because it's very sensitive data. But the output from that in our industry report, that is shared. That's available. That's generic, de-identified, aggregated data for the industry to see. And all stakeholders benefit from it, from the OEMs to the oil companies to the insurance companies, and obviously the operators themselves.
Very good.
So I've got another video which will help explain an element of what we're doing, and I wanted to come back to the human hazards analysis, and I think the video will explain it. And Dan, if you can pull that one up, the second video, we can have a quick conversation, follow up on that one, Jim, afterwards, if you've got any other questions on human hazards analysis.
Absolutely, and these are the videos that you were using last week as well. I mean, lots.
Correct. Yeah, and it's ideal.
Yep.
Yeah, ideal to use them because they're hot off the press. We use them just for our conference. So,
okay,
yeah, Dan
ready to
can
go.
roll that one. That'll be great. Thank you.
Our collective safety performance is made of numerous conversations, observations, and recommendations. It's built over years, but made in the moment. This living, breathing, broad collaboration reaches between organizations. In the past 12 months, there's been unprecedented collaboration between HeliOffshore, the Flight Safety Foundation, International Civil Aviation Organization, the Helicopter Safety Advisory Conference, Oil and Gas UK, and APITO, not to mention many other industry bodies and manufacturers, to publish and support IOGP's Report 690. In the past few months, 2 new wind farm recommended practices, one from G+ and one from HeliOffshore, have been launched. Proof of many years' collaboration between helicopter operators, aircraft manufacturers, energy companies, wind turbine manufacturers, and industry regulators. And we're proud to announce the same collaborative drive has delivered recent breakthroughs in human hazard analysis. Human hazard analysis, or HHA, is a tool used to identify and assess potential human errors in the operation or maintenance of a new or existing aircraft. This year, operators, maintainers, planners, engineers, and supervisors formed an open, honest collaboration for safety. They came together not to confront or compete, but to listen and learn, to share best maintenance practice and identify potential error traps in safety critical tasks. These safety conversations have already made a difference by shifting the focus from error and blame to shared problem solving and introducing a positive, proactive habit of learning from everyday practice. These same conversations have generated the information and insight manufacturers need to improve the aircraft design, documentation, and tooling to reduce hazards. Now, operators and manufacturers have published a new standardized practice for human hazards analysis, an exciting industry first and a challenge to our community. How will you implement these recommendations into your business? This is how collaboration for safety saves lives. And as the energy economy changes and as industries adapt, as we collect more data, as we understand more about what we must do to ensure no lives are lost in offshore aviation, our collaborations and practices must work hard to keep up. Safety demands collaborations that reach deep into our organizations, to the front lines we serve. To connect people with different roles and different understandings, often with different politics, priorities, and pressures. Yet, if we work at this, if we ask the question, listen for the answer, if we risk discomfort and irritation, if we encourage connection and collaboration, we will develop a resilient workforce served by an open, responsive, and increasingly aligned industry. What safety conversation do we need to have next?
Well, Francois, you can see, I think just playing that video, we've had some comments, questions come in. The quality of the video that people already want to show it, that's helping already with the collaboration. And questions beyond the wind farm. It shows, I think it shows society and it shows others outside of our industry that we are thinking about the solutions for the future as well. So, well done.
Absolutely, thanks. I appreciate that. And maybe it's an opportunity for me to ask everybody else another question if we're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it'd be quite good for some of your members on the line. If you guys are okay for me to ask you a question, let's do that. I've already pushed it out to your devices. If you don't see it, hit the refresh page. I pushed out a new question, and it is this: how could HeliOffshore and HI better collaborate for safety? So it's an opportunity for you guys to answer some of those questions. We just saw the video about what safety conversation should we be having next. allow HeliOffshore have a seminar slot at HeliExpo. Yeah, we do that. You know, generally every year we do. We come to HeliExpo and we have an offshore session. I think the last one was obviously in Anaheim, and we did one on HeliDecks. We had Patrick Bozeman, who sits both in HSAC and in HeliOffshore, as the chairman of both those groups. And he gave a great training day. I've delivered a few myself, so it's a good opportunity for us to connect with that segment of the market. And it predominantly, people who are non-offshore tend to come and sit in the audience just to see what we're up to, which is kind of fun. More projects like this and keep the conversations going. So that's a good point. And that was back to Jim's comment, right? Is we really need to keep the conversation going, and it does take a concerted effort. Trust me, when everybody is in their daily grind. I know in HeliOffshore we're a small organization, and we're coping with a lot on a daily basis. The HAI team is a bit bigger, but still you serving a huge community. So it comes with a massive workload. And when you're in your day-to-day grind, you know, just being able to pause, pick up the phone, talk to somebody else, join in a group conversation, just like we're doing today, just like Jim has invited HeliOffshore to come and sit here today, is what it's about. Because it's those conversations that will stimulate that spark of, oh yeah, you know, we should be talking about that. We should be having a joined up conversation. So, I mean, I see there's 65 people online. We've got 3 inputs. Hopefully somebody else will write something else and help us out here. How can we better collaborate for safety? Any great ideas? Because like I said earlier, we don't have all the answers or all the ideas. We require our members to come up with a lot of that stuff.
Well, that's where you talk. I think you focus on the front line, which is so important. You know, the people that are doing that daily, day in and day night, you know, they know what's happening, and they have the best recommendations of, or at least the ideas of how to make it safer. I mean, we can't sit back in our office and understand all of that. And that's one of the things, you know, that we've certainly hopefully been getting better at here with HAI, is being able to reach out and understand our members' problems and make our members' problems our problems, so we can solve them for industry instead of, you know, every member having to solve it for himself.
Yeah, Jim, you're absolutely right. And since I've been in HeliOffshore, I have a plan of activity set up for the year in terms of frontline visits. And I try and travel literally around the world to our members all over the place, either in South America, in Australia. I went to visit one of our members out in the middle of nowhere. I flew into Melbourne, and I got in a car and I drove 6 hours into the middle of the bush to this small operation with 5 AW139s serving ExxonMobil on their platforms out in the sea. And they saw me walk through the door and were like, what are you doing here? You know? And it was an opportunity for me to sit with the frontline pilots in the crew room, sit with the mechanics in the hangar, and have a really good conversation about what keeps them awake at night. What really, guys, what keeps you awake at night? And, you know, if that's a concern, let's have a conversation around it, because it may not be just you thinking that or seeing that or witnessing that. And you know, it's a great way, because all of a sudden we become a conduit for that conversation. And of course, that starts with us, and we link it into Flight Safety Foundation, HAI, EHA, IOGP, G+. We bring those on. Hey, has everybody heard about this before? Yeah, we have that problem too. Boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, you can see how it starts to build. If we sit in our stovepipes and our little corners and we have those little conversations with ourselves, we're not going to shift the needle. We just simply aren't. What else? What else has come in? More accident case study like Air Safety Institute fixed wing. Okay, that's good. Allow HR leaders to attend the HeliOffshore annual meeting. They do. Jim took part in our most recent one, and we hope that Jim and the team continue to attend. Next year we'll be in Lisbon, hopefully face to face. Seek common areas where operators use similar equipment and share experiences and best practice to find gaps and synergies, and compose working groups to discuss and document to learn from both environments. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean,
expand best practices. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
I was going to say the working groups are key. I mean, that's some of the things that we do, certainly with HAI as well as with VAST. I mean, that's one of the things to make sure that we've got these best practices, as some of these people are recommending here, and then to make sure that, you know, how do you ensure that it's something that we can now harmonize is one of the words you have to use globally to make sure that it means the same around the world. I know working with some of the major manufacturers, sometimes they're global industries. Their helicopters are being flown around the world, but yet, some nations have different things they need to get. And that's where I see it as HAI's responsibility, as well as now with VAST, if it's safety related, to make sure that we can help them harmonize so that they don't have to, again, have an issue with their product in different parts of the world.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And it just prevents duplication of effort. I mean, a good example is when I joined the industry, you'd have two operators, both competitors, sitting on either side of the airfield with an identical problem, with the same aircraft flying to the same installations. And guess what? They were both investing tons of money in coming to a solution on the same problem.
Right.
Right. So by pulling that intelligent resource, time, effort, where you're not competing on safety, of course, if it's IP or if it's something that's business and commercial oriented, that's a different question. But around safety, you come together through something like HeliOffshore, you share those resources, it costs you a fraction of the price to do it once, and you get a lot more brains together in the room to talk about it.
Exactly.
So
that kind of leads me into what, all the good ideas. Tell me about implementation. The implementation has got to be the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and bear with me, I've got another little video. We've got time. I've got another little video to show you.
Absolutely.
When I first joined, the first document we did was the HUMS recommended practice. We call it the best practice guide then. And using the term best practice really didn't jive with me because everybody's got a best practice, right? And we're like, well, it should be a recommended practice because we're not a standard setting organization. So we've renamed them. They are recommended practices. That's in line with our stakeholders who use the same terminology. So IOGP uses it, and Flight Safety Foundation, BARS uses it. We've connected up with those guys, and that's the most powerful collaboration we've got now, is that aligned set of recommended practices. So they now reference ours. But there's no point in doing a set of recommended practices and everybody just takes it, puts it on the shelf, says, thanks, good job, thank you. Puts it on the shelf, and they just carry on doing business the same way they've done it for 20 years. There is no point in doing that.
Right.
So, and there's no point. And like I said, it kind of stemmed from our observation that there was a little bit of an imbalance between the focus and effort plowed into generating these world-class leading recommended practices and the focus on turning those recommendations, which is a nice glossy document, into tangible behavioral changes on the front line. And we needed to understand that better. So we came up with a methodology to do that. And let me just share with you again quickly just some slides here, just to talk about that. And I think these are the recommended practices we've got out at the moment. So health and usage monitoring, the flight data monitoring, flight path management, wind farm recommended practices, and what we've got in the wings coming. It's going to be some search and rescue recommended practices. We're probably about 12 months out on that. And we've got the MMHEL, which is heli-deck recommended practices. That's done in conjunction with the work that's been done at HSAC, and that's been coordinated with them and a lot of international bodies. So EASA, FAA, UK, ICAO. It's a combination of a lot of that effort put together. So, and that's been driven by data as well, by the way. It's not anecdotal, it's been driven by data. And there's no point in doing all these things, right? And then going, well, are they working? Oh, I don't know. And I had a question when I first joined HeliOffshore, and I was singing praises about our HUMS recommended practice. And somebody said in the audience, well, how do you measure that it's working or making a difference? And I sat there going, we survey the members, and what the results like? Yeah, not great. How many people are using it? Yeah, not a great amount of people are using it. And so that really drove us to understand a proper implementation methodology. So we sat down, we did a lot of noodling and brainstorming over this one, and come out with a proper methodology and provide a tool that would be useful to the operator community, to the front line. So a gap analysis tool. Effectively, that's what it boils down to, but it's in our platform. And you literally will see this wheel when you click into it. You've got to run through a video, you'll see this wheel, and you can click on each of those spaces. And it takes you around the start, you go around the flow, you get the little inner circle, which is stuff that you've got to do inside your organization. And attached to each of these, we don't have that element built in, will be white label materials. So papers, reports, stuff to help you understand what it means to, do you have the right resources? Do you have the right access? Does your frontline understand why you're doing this? All those sorts of questions. And then part of that, so around about step 2, the TAN one, organizational valuation, that's the tool. So we took our recommended practice, we distilled it into some real simple questions, and we converted what is a recommended practices into questions of, are you doing X, Y, or Z? And simple, the answer, yes, we are. We're thinking about it, and here's the date when we're going to implement it, or no, we're not doing it, and here's why. And when you go through that process and you answer all the questions around that recommended practice, you hit the print button, and it prints you a nice report. It prints some timelines of all the things that you are going to do and when you're going to do them. It prints out all your answers to why you're not going to do certain things out of the recommended practice. And then it gives you a list of all the things where you've just gone, yep, we do that, we do that, we do that. And they can use that report to have a conversation with their customer, with their regulator, and internally, where they can talk internally, say, well, why aren't we doing that? The recommended practices said we should be doing, our approach is a 700-foot rate of descent. We're at 600 or we're at 800. Why? And so it really starts to stimulate those questions. And we're getting the industry, which is doing things completely differently, a little bit closer together. The other thing about this, sorry, Jim, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's certainly, it helped the standardization alone that brings safety in there, and just trying to understand why, people are using the same aircraft but doing different approaches.
Yeah, and that was the weird thing. When I'm coming from the airline industry, we all done the same way, exactly the same way. When I'm flying a 7.4 or a 7.3 or a Gulfstream, it didn't matter. I flew an ILS the same way. Now, a lot of guys will shoot me for saying that in the helicopter industry. Go, it's not the same. But in essence, for the oil and gas, they are flying it like an airline, for the going out to the rigs. It is more like an airline. So it's not like aerial work or HEMS. That is a different risk category. They operate completely differently, and we get that. We understand that. But there's a lot of work going on with EHA in that area with the SIP approaches, those GPS type approaches, PR-NAV approaches to help try and standardize how you fly approaches to a hospital, or if you can, how you can plot them out to a place. There's lots of work going on in the search and rescue area. So what we're trying to do is lead with these guys to get them closer together, and then hopefully make it a little bit more boring and predictable, but less dangerous in that respect.
Boring and predictable is a very good thing to have. I like it.
So
I've got
one final video there. If Dan can play that one.
Coming up right now.
Thank you, Dan.
Amongst all the demands for your time and attention, how do you know what's important? Lying on that shelf in your office, buried on your website, in your desk drawer, is a safety recommendation and recommended practices with potential to make our industry safer. These are hard-won recommendations representing days, weeks, and years of careful experimentation and expert consideration. Let's read between the lines. You'll find an opportunity to improve your team's safety performance. You'll find an obligation to respond in a deliberate way. Respect and review your peers' hard work and consider what it means for your business. Consider the gap between your practice and recommended practice. Tell us, do you agree with what the recommended practice says? Will you adopt it and follow it? If not, why not? Tell us so we learn from each other, so we continue to improve together until no lives are lost in offshore aviation. We'll help you. HeliOffshore has thought long and hard about how we best support our members to implement the very best practice. We have developed an implementation process to support our members to access the right recommendation at the right time, to interrogate reports authors, to analyse the implications of reports and recommendations for your role and region, to identify resources needed for change, and track the data to identify industry hurdles and industry progress. This way, we won't waste the blood, sweat and tears and years of collective knowledge represented by these reports. This way will ensure important safety recommendations are read, adopted, lived, and save lives. Access the HeliOffshore implementation tool in our collaborative intranet called Space. Are you in?
Outstanding. So before we go to questions, where do you see the offshore industry in 5 to 10 years?
That's a really good question, Jim. You very gladly you joined us in a panel we did on the future of aviation, right? We try to break it up into what the future is tomorrow, right? Although there's some really cool technology coming in hybrid engines, in biofuels, in automation, in autonomy, in the collaboration in terms of airspace between manned and unmanned, there's a huge amount of stuff going on. But I think for us, really, in the next 5 years, if I were to wrap it up in 30 seconds, we really need short-term improvements around our data program. We really need to make sure that we use the data program or the data to its biggest potential. And by doing that, we're creating a leading indicators project. We've got that going now. And we started to try and tap into a lot of the leading indicators. It's called info rate. And we don't have a lot of accidents. That's a good thing. We don't have a lot of accidents. We want to stop them all. But it doesn't give us, it's too reactive and it doesn't give us enough cross-section. We really need to get to the leading indicators. We need to see those weak signals. And the data program is doing that. So that's where we're making the next big step. Mental health and well-being, we touched on that earlier. That's the next big step for us. We're scratching the surface with our focused work, but we're trying to connect with everybody else that's talking this. There's great work with Flight Safety Foundation going on. There's great work with IOGP and the oil companies and the energy companies going on mental health and well-being to help our frontline people understand it's okay to talk about this stuff and to empower the senior and middle managers to allow those conversations to happen. And obviously, the next big thing is the energy transition, right? How do we go from where we are today into less reliance on fossil fuels and going into those new markets? So for me, that's a summary of the next 5 years, and it's here. I mean, that's what came out of the conversation, Jim, we had on that Future of Aviation panel. It's here. It's now. It's happening. We can't wait for it. So we need to embrace it and adapt to it, I think, is the key.
Yes, and I think, I mean, you touched on so many things there in the last 2 minutes, but yeah, they're all key indicators of that, somebody's moving the cheese and we need to keep up with it. We need to continue that safety conversation. Certainly, when I came in and looked at some of the gaps, and there's one of the reasons we evolved from the International Helicopter Safety Team to be all-inclusive with the vast vertical aviation safety team. And then just congratulating you again on the fine work you're doing with data, and then trying to figure out how can we do that at a international level, share the information, de-identified, protect it, but so that it benefits society by making sure we have zero fatalities in our industry. I mean, it's got to be a goal that we have to sign up for. And then we need to do, we need to work to get to that end. So really appreciate the work you've done, and certainly through our collaboration, we'll figure out how can we expand that. Just as we had people watching it today ask us, how do we expand that? How do we get access to it? And all of your information is available to everyone, is it not?
The work that we do is available to everybody. Yeah, you heard on the video there, connect with our collaborative space. That space is for members only. It's where all the work groups do their work. So one of my jobs is to oversee about 170 positions worldwide, all working on these initiatives. And we have a bunch of work groups going on in those particular work streams. So that collaborative space is for those guys to do that work. But a lot of our stuff is available on the resources tab. I saw one of the questions earlier about, hey, how do I get the wind farm RPs? Go on helioffshore.org. And if you click on the resources tab, there's a whole bunch of resources in there from our recommended practice. You'll be able to the wind farm one for that person who asked that question.
Great.
I can't remember who it was.
So Dan, is there anything out there that I'm not seeing, or do we need to answer a question, or is it time to wrap up?
Well, I think you guys did a great job of covering all the material because we only had a couple of questions, and Francois just answered Josh's question about where to find the wind farm practices page. So that makes that one pretty easy to move on past. The only other one we had is from one of our longtime viewers, Gabriel Armato. who is very interested in attending your live conference next year in Portugal. He wanted to know if your videos are available on YouTube or on your website, and where you could watch them again or share them.
Yeah, so the videos, I mean, like I said, they're hot off the press. We just got them from the conference. So our comms director, what she'll do is she'll make those available at some point. We do have a YouTube channel. What she'll do is she'll repurpose them a little bit. You'll notice that I took the conference logo off the front and back of them. We try and reuse some of that material. So she'll repurpose them. We're going to put together a conference video, which will be an edited down version of that, and it'll include those videos, so you can probably go and see it all there.
Very good.
The only other question we normally finish up with, Francois, is for the audience who's here, if there's one thing you'd like them to remember today, what would that be?
Collaboration.
Man, that's a good question, Dan. I was going to go straight to the collaborative thing. Collaboration, right? I'm hoping that I put across a message loud and clear today. HeliOffshore doesn't have all the answers, and HeliOffshore is quite a small organization serving a sector of the market. And I'm hoping that the work that we're doing will be seen by others and inspire others. So I have this saying: action inspires emotion, and emotion inspires action, right? And we're in action, and I'm hoping it inspires the emotion for people to get involved and contribute and collaborate. And if you have any questions, you can contact us at info@helioffshore.org. I'll happily pick up and have a conversation with you.
Okay, Francois, well, we appreciate your time this afternoon. It's late in the evening, almost in the nighttime for you. We're grateful that you were able to spend the time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And have a good evening. And I'm going to say goodbye, Francois, and you could have a nice sleep tonight, hopefully. It was a pleasure having you on here and having a conversation. And any last words before we turn it over to Dan to close things out?
No, it's been my pleasure to be part of the conversation. I'm hoping all the attendees enjoyed it. I enjoyed having a quick chat with you guys and connecting through Paul EV and hearing what you've got to say. Jim, Dan, thank you so much for inviting us. Thanks for keeping the conversation going. Thanks for the collaboration. We'll speak to you real soon.
And we look forward to hopefully doing this again sometime in the future, as they requested to keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Thank you so much. We do have just a few things to wrap up real quick. Let me share. As Jim had indicated early in his presentation, we wanted to share the website for the new Vertical Aviation Safety Team, or VAST. It is vast.aero. So do not look for it under .com, do not look for it under .org or anything like that. Vast.aero, A-E-R-O at the end of that. There's some great information. There's actually a ton of information on there. So we look forward to having you visit that site. There we go. Save the date. The next webinar, June 10th. Salute to Excellence Communications recipient and career opportunities for women in the rotorcraft industry. Join us as we salute the recipient of the 2021 Salute to Excellence Communications Award, sponsored by Lightspeed Aviation. That's Jeanette Eaton of Sikorsky. We'll have a short presentation with Jeanette, and then we will transition into a discussion with industry leaders on career opportunities for women in the rotorcraft industry. And it should be a really great webinar in total for next week. Look forward to having you join us for that one. Feedback, there will be a questionnaire coming to you shortly. We do ask that you share with us what you liked, what you didn't like, if there's anything that we can change in the webinars. And of course, for HAI, that same message applies. Let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and if there's anything that we can change or anything that we can do to help you. The easiest way to do that is through the president@rotor.org email address. Jim sees everything, and he does assign those for tasking to our staff members. That does conclude our webinar today. Until next week, we ask that you be safe, that you fly safe, and we'll see you soon.